In the previous tutorial, we talked at length about how in 1815 the great powers had met in Vienna to essentially map out a road for peace and for lasting peace. And many historians consider that successful because no major war occurred between the great powers between 1815 and 1854 when the Crimean War broke out. However, within that period, there were threats to international peace that the great powers had to deal with and had to confront. And one of the first major threats to international stability and peace in that period of 1815 to 1854 occurred in 1821 when the Greeks rose up in revolt against the Ottoman Empire. There were many reasons why this happened. The first one's very simple, and that is that most of the population of Greece were Christians. The Ottoman Empire was essentially an Islamic empire run by Turkey. So there was a major cultural difference there. The Greeks had also been inspired. They'd been inspired by the French Revolution in particular. They'd seen that monarchies or empires could be overthrown. Change could happen from within. They'd been inspired by that, and they thought that perhaps that was something they could do in Greece. There was a growing middle class in Greece. They were educated. They no longer wanted Ottoman rule. They were literate, and they believed in Greek independence. Now, in 1814, an organisation was actually set up called the Philic Heter. The Philic Heter. This was a secret organisation whose main goal was to end Ottoman occupation of Greece. This came to a head in 1821 when the Greek Revolt began, and in 1821 it was really triggered. This kind of an initial revolution which the Philic Heter organised was really inspired by really poor living conditions in Greece. So the economy had really got to a point in 1821 where people were fed up of the conditions there. So part of this revolt was actually about economic conditions rather than some kind of religious war. The middle class wanted reform. We talked about them. They wanted change. They wanted positive change. And yes, there was that religious discontent. So they rose up in 1821. And initially, the Ottomans managed to control that revolution. It rose up in various different parts of Greece. And initially, the Ottomans were quite successful in restricting it. However, within a few years, things had changed around. By about 1823, things were starting to perhaps look a little bit worse for the Ottomans. And at that point, they actually appealed to Egypt in 1824. They appealed to Egypt for help. They appealed to Egypt. And in particular, they appealed to a gentleman called Mehmet Ali. Mehmet Ali, who was the Pasha of Egypt, the leader of Egypt. Mehmet Ali agreed to help out. He sent his son, Ibrahim Ali, with 10,000 men to Crete and then to Morea, where they landed in February 1825. And he basically had the best army one of the best armies in the world at that point. So he sent the 10,000 soldiers specifically to help out the Ottomans, and they were very successful in doing that. And the Greek revolt slowed down, and the Greeks appealed for international help at this point, and they'd already appealed for international help. Metternich, who we mentioned in the previous tutorial, very much anti-intervention. He was the leader of Austria. He was very conservative. He was very reactionary. He believed in the balance of power. He didn't believe the great powers should be getting involved in a potentially costly, divisive war. However, in Russia, Orthodox Christian country in the main, A lot of support for the Greeks there. Britain, again, with the religious element. But even with Britain, Britain knows that Russia is interested in intervening, and Britain knows that if Russia intervenes and is successful, then Russia could actually threaten the trade routes along the Mediterranean that are so important for Britain. So with Britain, again, it's that little bit of self-interest with that religious element that's causing the British to be quite interested in intervening in Greece. And then, of course, the French were also there or thereabouts and also felt some affinity towards the Greeks. In 1825, there was actually a change of leadership in Russia. Change in Russia. Now, previous to 1825, Tsar Alexander had been in power, and Tsar Alexander was very much in favour of working with Metternich. But the new Tsar Nicholas I was very much pro-intervention. And this really swung things, because suddenly the Russians were looking very much like they were going to do something about the situation in Greece. And that's when Britain decided it would cooperate with Russia to restrict, again, in this kind of self-interest driven way, would restrict Russian gains. And they signed something called the St. Petersburg Protocol. The St. Petersburg Protocol of 1826, that said that Britain and Russia would support Greek independence and would actually work together to achieve that aim. No Austria, by the way, involved in that agreement of 1826. So again, Metternich feels fronted. Metternich feels as though his views aren't being listened to. This negotiation now carries on in terms of how the Greek independence is going to be achieved by Russia and Britain. Treaty of London of 1827. Treaty of London. France now comes in on the agreement. Austria and Prussia refused to join the agreement because it went all against everything that Metternich believed in, so they stayed out. Metternich famously said the Continental Alliance on which our peace and prosperity rests has now ceased to exist, based on this kind of Russian, French, British plan for intervention. So it was decided that a British, French and Russian naval fleet would go to Morea, which was an island just at the bottom of Greece, to stop Turkish and Egyptian transporters and their supplies. When they got there, they confronted the fleet, and Mehmet Ali, his naval fleet was there along with the Ottoman naval fleet in Navarino Bay. This was in October 1827, and they confronted the fleet. So the two fleets came together in Navarino Bay, the British, French and Russian fleets versus the Ottoman and Mehmet Ali's Egyptian fleet, and the Allies were successful, and they basically annihilated Mehmet Ali's forces. They annihilated the Ottoman naval forces. The French actually landed troops as well to actually assist the Greeks on the mainland in the fighting that was still going on against the Ottomans. So suddenly the tide has very much turned here. I forgot to mention actually when the Ottomans appealed to Mehmet Ali for help, they actually offered him Morea, which was a part of Greece, when successful. Now obviously Mehmet Ali, Ibrahim Pasha, certainly his son, has not been successful. Ibrahim Ali has not been successful now, so that could be an issue later on. We are going to find out that it will be an issue later on, because Mehmet Ali will want what he's been promised, regardless of the fact that actually the Ottomans lost this war. Navarino Bay, obviously, was a huge international incident, and Russia, actually following it, announced its intention to go to war against Turkey. So actually in 1828, Russia went to war independently against Turkey, and they made gains from this. In 1828, the Treaty of Adrianople was signed, and Russia made further territorial gains. Metternich, of course, is absolutely worried about all of this. He's petrified that all the powers are now just going to follow their own paths, and this will lead to war. And also, the success of Greek independence showed how weak Austria was as well. So it was Metternich, as leader of Austria, is obviously even more concerned. So in 1830, Greek independence was declared. They had achieved what they wanted. It was declared, and it was ratified globally in 1832. And Greece had got its independence from the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, one of their major parts of their empire had crumbled. Now the question is, what's the ripple effect of this going to be? How's this going to affect the Ottoman Empire? And you'll actually see a few years later a rebellion in Poland, which was not successful against the Ottomans, but again, it's a sign of things to come. And this would go on now all the way through this period, and would be known as the Eastern Question. How the great powers were going to deal with the decline of the Ottoman Empire.